Security blocked her path at the burial ceremony, but what happened when the four-star commander arrived changed everything. The uniformed sentry couldn't have been older than 19. His dress blues were crisp, medals gleaming under the overcast Virginia sky. His gloved hand extended toward a distant hillside where civilians gathered behind velvet ropes. "This area is restricted to immediate relatives and official dignitaries only," he announced, his tone rehearsed but firm. Rachel Bennett didn't budge. Her auburn hair was tied back simply, and her eyes remained locked on the casket draped in stars and stripes 200 feet ahead. Something heavy settled in her chest. A debt unpaid. A promise to keep. "I'm aware of the restrictions," she replied, voice steady despite the funeral's solemn weight. "I'm here to honor him properly." The young private's expression tightened. He had his orders, a printed roster of approved names, and this civilian woman wasn't listed anywhere. He saw plain clothes among a sea of decorated uniforms and ribbons. "The civilian observation point is up that way," he repeated, pointing again with barely concealed frustration. Just as he turned to dismiss her completely, Rachel raised her palm. Resting there was a heavy bronze medallion, edges worn from years of handling. Etched into its surface was an emblem he didn't recognize, a rotorcraft silhouette overlaid with mythological wings. No rank insignia, no standard unit markings. The sentry glanced at it, confused. "Ma'am, I don't know what that is. Please relocate to the public zone." His dismissal was absolute. Case closed in his mind. But Rachel Bennett hadn't navigated a shredded helicopter through hostile fire by accepting the first roadblock thrown at her. She remained exactly where she stood, silent defiance in her calm stare. Private Jackson felt irritation prickling his neck. This woman wasn't causing a scene, which somehow made it worse. Her quiet persistence disrupted the choreographed solemnity of the ceremony. He squared his shoulders, attempting to project authority that felt borrowed rather than earned. "Ma'am, this is my final warning. Move to the designated area or face removal." "I understand your position, Private," Rachel said evenly. She returned the coin to her pocket and produced a simple leather billfold. Her Veterans Affairs card emerged, photo and name visible. Rachel Bennett. Jackson took the card reluctantly, fingers barely making contact. He studied the picture, then the name. Bennett. Nothing. Not on the cabinet secretary list, not among foreign ambassadors, not on the family tree. He handed it back with an exasperated sigh. "Doesn't matter. You're not authorized. Could you verify with the family coordinator? They're expecting me to attend." "The family is grieving," he snapped, professionalism cracking. "They're not taking requests. I have direct orders." Sensing the impasse, a staff sergeant with 3 rows of ribbons and the weathered look of 20 years' service approached. "What's happening here, Jackson?" "She won't comply, Sergeant Hayes," Jackson said, relieved for backup. "Insists on main ceremony access." "Not on any list?" Hayes turned his intimidating gaze toward Rachel. It was a look honed to silence recruits and put civilians in their proper place. A man who lived by the book, who saw existence in authorized and unauthorized. He assessed her casual navy blouse, plain trousers, civilian handbag. "She didn't belong. Show me identification," he commanded, voice like gravel on asphalt. Rachel handed over her VA card again. Hayes examined it far longer than necessary, tilting it under the light as though expecting forgery. "Bennett," he muttered, testing the name on his tongue. "Never heard it. Did you serve under the general?" "I did," Rachel confirmed. Hayes's eyes narrowed to slits. "What capacity?" It was an interrogation now, probing for inconsistencies. "I flew helicopters." A barely perceptible smirk touched his lips. "Helicopters, right." His tone dripped skepticism. "Look, miss, many folks feel connected to the general. He inspired millions. But today belongs to those who truly served alongside him. His command, his family. Can't let everyone who met him once walk through." The condescension was palpable, a pressure Rachel could feel against her skin. Several mourners, colonels in dress greens, command sergeants in formal attire, slowed as they passed, curiosity drawn by the quiet confrontation. The scene was becoming a focal point of unwanted attention. "Sergeant, I'm not just someone who crossed his path," Rachel said, her composure an unbreakable shield. "My presence here matters. Everyone thinks they matter," Hayes retorted, voice rising. He was enjoying the small audience, the chance to enforce protocol, to be the immovable gatekeeper. He tapped his radio meaningfully. "Here's the deal. Walk to the public hill voluntarily, or I call the military police and they escort you off base. Choose now." The threat hung in the air like smoke. He was leveraging the full weight of military authority to move one unarmed woman a few hundred yards. He saw a problem to eliminate, not a person to understand. His eyes fell on her worn leather bag, specifically a circular fabric patch stitched onto the strap. Faded colors, barely legible. It depicted a medical cross with rotor blades, the symbol for combat medevac, a dust-off emblem. To Sergeant Hayes, it was just another unauthorized decoration, a costume piece. "What's this supposed to represent?" he asked with disdain. "Some kind of memorabilia?" As he spoke those words, the world around Rachel dissolved. Arlington's manicured lawns vanished, replaced by the blinding, dust-choked landscape of Helmand Province. The smell of fresh-cut grass was gone, replaced by memories of burning aviation fuel, gunpowder residue, and copper-scented blood. The patch on her bag ceased being fabric. It became a doorway. She was back inside her Black Hawk's cabin, rotor vibrations thrumming through her bones. She felt the violent lurch as the aircraft touched down in a brownout, a storm of talc-fine dust. The ramp dropped before the wheels had fully settled. She heard desperate, frantic voices as medics loaded a stretcher. The wounded soldier on it was ghostly pale, his division patch matching the general's unit. Through the chaos, she heard the calm, anchoring voice of her aircraft commander over the intercom, a man she'd trusted with her life countless times. "We're extracting everyone, Bennett. Load them up now." The memory lasted less than a heartbeat, but it was more vivid than the smug sergeant standing before her. That patch wasn't decoration. It was testament, a piece of her soul left in the dust of forgotten battlefields. Wars that Sergeant Hayes, with his stateside ribbons and parade ground posture, could never truly comprehend. She blinked. Arlington's green expanse snapped back into focus, her expression unchanged, but something inside had crystallized into steel. Standing some distance away, partially hidden behind a massive oak tree, was a man whose grief carved deep lines across his face. Command Sergeant Major Thompson, retired, was a monument of military bearing even in his dark civilian suit. 32 years of service, 23 of them alongside General Marcus Stone. They'd risen together from mud-covered training exercises to sterile Pentagon conference rooms. Stone had been the visionary leader. Thompson had been his conscience, his enforcer, his oldest brother in arms. Thompson had noticed the disturbance at the perimeter initially with annoyance. A funeral for someone of Stone's caliber demanded flawless decorum. But as he watched, annoyance transformed into curiosity. The woman possessed an unnatural stillness. He'd seen that kind of calm before. In soldiers' moments before breaching a hostile door. In commanders when operations went sideways. It was the calm of someone forged in fire who knew exactly what they were capable of. He couldn't hear their words, but body language spoke volumes. 2 guards postured aggressively. The woman centered and immovable. He moved closer, scanning her for details. Plain clothing, unremarkable initially. Then he saw it. The bag, the patch, the faded dust-off insignia. It hit him like physical impact. His mind raced back 12 years to a chaotic forward operating base filled with radio static and stale coffee. He remembered General Stone, then a 1-star, pacing like a caged predator. monitoring desperate transmissions from a patrol that had been ambushed. They were hemorrhaging casualties, ammunition nearly gone, air support unavailable due to weather, a death sentence unfolding in real time. Then a new voice cut through the static. Female, composed, almost eerily serene. Her call sign was Phoenix. She was flying an evacuation mission in the area and had intercepted their distress calls. Against explicit orders to avoid the hot zone, she announced her intention to attempt extraction. Thompson remembered Stone grabbing the handset, ordering her to abort, telling her it was suicide, and he remembered her simple, bone-chilling reply, "Sir, you have casualties, and I have capacity. Coming in now?" Thompson looked back at the woman being harassed by Sergeant Hayes. Auburn hair. He caught Hayes say her name mockingly. Bennett. The name connected with the call sign instantly. Phoenix. Rachel Bennett. Cold fury washed over the old sergeant major, making his hands shake. They weren't just disrespecting a veteran. They were desecrating the memory of the very hero they were supposed to be honoring. They were turning away one of the legends from Stone's own history. They were gatekeeping the gatecrasher who saved their commander's life. He didn't hesitate. Turning his back on the scene, he pulled out his phone and walked briskly away from the cordon. His thumb found a contact he rarely called but never deleted. Major General Rodriguez, currently serving as Deputy Chief of Staff. Rodriguez had been Stone's executive officer during Afghanistan. He would understand immediately. The phone answered on the first ring. "Rodriguez here." "General, it's CSM Thompson, retired," he said. Voice low and urgent, words clipped. "I'm at Arlington for Stone's service. There's a situation at the main entrance. Security is blocking a woman. Name is Bennett. Rachel Bennett." A pause on the line. Thompson could practically hear the general's mind working. "She's wearing a dust-off patch, sir," Thompson pressed, needing to be certain. "Helmand Province. Call sign Phoenix." The silence that followed was heavy with dawning horror and rage. When Rodriguez finally spoke, his voice was tight, barely controlled. "Stay there, Sergeant Major. Don't let her leave under any circumstances." "I'm inbound," the call ended. Thompson pocketed his phone and turned back. The two guards had now been joined by a master sergeant, escalating their intimidation. He didn't intervene directly, not his place anymore, but he stood watch, a silent, immovable sentinel. The cavalry was coming. Inside a secure Pentagon office, Major General Rodriguez slammed his phone down hard enough to make his aide flinch. "Pull the service record for Chief Warrant Officer Rachel Bennett," he barked, face thunderous. "Call sign Phoenix, immediately." The aide, a sharp young captain, didn't waste time with questions. He recognized that tone, crisis mode. Fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing personnel databases. "Bennett? Rachel? Here, sir. Warrant Officer, Aviation Branch." Cross-reference her deployment with General Stone's command. "OEF 2011 through 2013, Rodriguez ordered, already grabbing his service coat. The captain's eyes went wide as he scrolled. Page after page of commendations, flight logs, after-action summaries. "Sir, my God. Distinguished Service Cross. 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses. Silver Star. Multiple air medals with Valor device." He paused, reading from a citation, voice hushed with awe. "November 9th, 2012. Under sustained and accurate enemy fire, then CW-3 Bennett repeatedly flew her aircraft into contested terrain to evacuate 19 critically wounded personnel. Despite catastrophic damage to her tail rotor assembly and cracked windscreen, with her co-pilot incapacitated, she successfully extracted all casualties and piloted the damaged aircraft back to friendly lines. He looked up, stunned. "Sir, the recommending officer for the DSC was Brigadier General Stone." Rodriguez's jaw clenched so tight, a vein pulsed at his temple. "He didn't just recommend her, Captain. He told me if the president ever asked him to name the single bravest soldier he'd ever known, he would say her name without a second's hesitation. He grabbed his cover from its stand. "Get me a vehicle. Notify General Patterson's staff we're coming to them. Priority movement. Tell them Phoenix is at the gate, and the honor guard is turning her away." Back at the funeral, Sergeant Hayes and Private Jackson had been joined by their senior NCO, a master sergeant whose immaculate uniform and air of exhausted authority signaled the end of negotiation. He hadn't asked for Rachel's story. He'd only been told there was a disruption. His job was simple: end it. "Ma'am," he began, voice stripped of warmth, "you've been repeatedly instructed to relocate to the civilian viewing area. You've refused. You are now disrupting a state funeral." He stepped closer deliberately, invading her personal space. "This is your final directive. Leave this area immediately. If you refuse to comply, military police will escort you off this installation. You will be cited for trespassing." He pointed a contemptuous finger at the patch on her bag. "And, considering this unauthorized insignia, you may face charges for fraudulent representation of military service. Do you understand?" It was the ultimate escalation, the final unforgivable accusation. To be called a fraud, a liar, a thief of honor. Here, at the funeral of the man who owed her his life and the lives of his soldiers. A flicker of something dangerous sparked in Rachel's eyes, but her voice, when it came, was as cold and quiet as the marble headstones surrounding them. "I understand what you're saying, Master Sergeant," she said, "but you have no idea who you're talking to." Before the Master Sergeant could issue another threat, the low rumble of approaching engines cut through the air. A convoy of 3 black government sedans, lights off but purpose unmistakable, pulled silently along the service road behind the security cordon. The guards turned, confusion replacing their annoyance. The lead sedan's doors opened, and Major General Rodriguez emerged, movement sharp with barely suppressed anger. He was followed by his aide and a full-bird colonel, but it was the figure who stepped from the second vehicle that made the blood drain from the 3 guards' faces. General Patterson, a 4-star, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, exited the car. He was scheduled to deliver the eulogy. Instead, he was here at the perimeter, and his face was a mask of glacial fury. The Master Sergeant, Hayes, and Jackson snapped to attention so violently it was almost comical, their bodies rigid with shock and fear. The procession of senior officers moved with singular purpose. General Patterson walked directly past the petrified guards as though they were invisible obstacles. He didn't slow, didn't acknowledge them until he stood directly before Rachel Bennett. The air itself seemed to crackle. Nearby mourners had all stopped, captivated by the unfolding drama. General Patterson looked at Rachel, his stern expression melting into profound respect and deep regret. He said nothing. Instead, he brought his right hand up in a salute so crisp, so perfect, it could have been immortalized in bronze. A gesture of deference, of honor, from one of the most powerful military leaders in the world to the unassuming woman in the navy blouse. Instinctively, Major General Rodriguez, the colonel, and every uniformed person within sight followed their commander's example. A wave of salutes rippled through the assembly, a silent, powerful tribute that washed over the scene and left the 3 guards isolated in their ignorance. After a long, heavy moment, General Patterson lowered his hand. "Chief Bennett," he said, his voice deep, resonant, filled with emotion that stunned onlookers. "It is an honor to see you. General Stone spoke of you constantly. He once told me that if it weren't for Phoenix, he would have returned from Helmand a decade earlier beneath a flag." He turned not just to the guards, but to the entire gathering, his voice rising with command authority, ensuring every person could hear. "For those who don't know this woman, allow me to introduce a living legend. This is Chief Warrant Officer Rachel Bennett, retired. On the night of November 9th, 2012, in the Kunar Valley, a place most of us pray we never see, then CW3 Bennett flew her medevac helicopter, call sign Dustoff 73, directly into Hell's front door. He paused, letting the weight settle. The silence was absolute. A ranger company from then Brigadier General Stone's command was encircled, sustaining mass casualties, on the verge of being overrun. Air support was denied due to extreme threat conditions. It was a death sentence, but Chief Bennett, monitoring their transmissions on guard frequency, disregarded direct orders to stay clear. With her aircraft absorbing continuous machine gun and RPG fire, with her co-pilot grievously wounded, with her tail rotor disintegrating, she did not land once, not twice, but 3 separate times in that kill zone. His gaze swept over the crowd, over generals and privates, politicians and families. 3 times she flew into the heart of the inferno. She personally dragged wounded men onto her bird, while her crew chief provided covering fire. She saved 19 men that night. 19 sons, brothers, fathers came home because this woman refused to abandon them. He let his words sink in, then continued. General Stone is being laid to rest today because he survived to complete a distinguished 30-year career. He lived to meet his grandchildren. He lived to inspire a generation of leaders. He lived because of the actions of this woman standing before you. The hero of that day is not the man we are mourning. As great as he was, the hero of that day is standing right here. General Patterson then turned his glacial stare upon the 3 guards. The Master Sergeant seemed to physically shrink inside his uniform. "Master Sergeant," the general's voice was low, menacing. "You and your men will report to my office at the Pentagon at 1600 hours. You will explain to me in excruciating detail how you managed to fail at every conceivable level. You failed to verify credentials. You failed to de-escalate appropriately. You failed to exercise judgment. But your most catastrophic failure was one of perception. You failed to see the soldier standing directly in front of you." He let the words hang like an executioner's blade. "You saw a woman in civilian clothes and made an assumption. That assumption, that reflexive, unexamined bias, is poison. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear and to the memory of the man you claim to be honoring." The Master Sergeant opened his mouth, a stammered apology forming, but the general cut him off with a sharp hand gesture. He turned back to Rachel, expression softening once more. "Chief, what would you have them learn from this moment? What should I tell them?" All eyes were on Rachel. She stood with quiet dignity that seemed to emanate like light. She looked not at the general, but at the pale, terrified face of young Private Jackson. "General," she said, her voice clear and carrying across the hushed crowd. "Standards exist for a reason. They keep us alive. They ensure mission success. They don't recognize gender. They don't care about appearance. The problem is never the standard itself. The problem is when we decide in our own minds who we'll apply those standards to." She paused, letting it sink in. "Don't lower the standards. Just apply them equally to everyone. That's all." As she spoke the word standards, her mind flashed back one final time. Not to dust and chaos, but to the quiet intensity of her cockpit moments before that final landing. The master caution panel was illuminated like a Christmas display. Warning alarms screamed through the headset. The aircraft was vibrating itself apart. Through the spiderweb of cracks in the armored windscreen, she could see muzzle flashes winking from the tree line. An impossible situation. She heard General Stone's voice, raw with desperation, crackling over the radio. "Phoenix, you cannot land here. We are under effective fire. I am ordering you to abort." And she heard her own voice, a stranger's voice, impossibly calm, cutting through her own fear. "Copy that, sir. But you have wounded and I have capacity. I'm coming in hot. That was the standard. Not the one printed in regulation manuals, but the one written on her heart. You don't leave anyone behind, ever. And you apply it to everyone, regardless of cost. In the weeks following General Stone's funeral, a quiet but significant transformation occurred within the military district of Washington. A comprehensive revision to standard operating procedures for all ceremonial security was issued, with new emphasis on de-escalation and professional verification protocols. A mandatory training module on unconscious bias, featuring a heavily redacted after-action report of the Arlington incident, was implemented across the command. Master Sergeant Hayes was quietly reassigned to a training facility in a remote location, where his career could fade into obscurity without fanfare. One Saturday afternoon, several months later, Rachel was shopping at the commissary on Fort Myer. Her cart was half full, and she was debating between two coffee brands. Just another shopper, a woman in jeans and a simple T-shirt, completely anonymous. "Ma'am?" She turned. It was Private Jackson, the young guard from the funeral. He was in civilian clothes and looked even younger without his dress uniform. He stood awkwardly, gripping his shopping basket handle, eyes fixed on the floor. "Ma'am?" "Chief," he stammered, finally looking up, his face flushed with shame. "I just wanted to find you to apologize properly. There's no excuse for my behavior, for what I said. It was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry." Rachel studied him for a long moment. She saw no malice in his eyes, only genuine, profound regret. She saw a young soldier who had made a mistake and been forced to learn a brutal public lesson. She offered a small, weary sigh. "You're young, Private," she said gently. "You've got a long career ahead if you want it. You learned something that day. Many people go their entire lives without learning it. Don't waste the lesson." He looked at her, expression pleading, seeking absolution. She gave him something better. She gave him his mission. "See the soldier, Jackson," she said. "Not the packaging. See the soldier first, every single time. That's everything." She gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of closure. Then she turned back to the coffee selection, leaving him standing in the aisle with his lesson and a future he now had to earn. The courage of veterans like Rachel Bennett defines our nation's finest values. To honor their service and discover more stories of extraordinary aviators, please like this video and subscribe to UFold Tales.